so much for joining us. This has been a big month so far for political news, with the inauguration of Donald Trump to a second term and Governor Healy laying out her plans for our state going forward. Let's talk about all of that, or as much as we can get to, with our guest. You'll recognize Attorney Jon Deaton. He drew the largest vote for a Republican Senate candidate in years in his loss to Elizabeth Warren last fall. Good to see you, Jon. Welcome back.
Good to see you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're not going head-to-head with the senator this time, but who knows? Maybe next time.
I haven't ruled anything out, my friend.
Interesting. Maybe we can talk more about that later. But as you watched Mr. Trump take office, what was going through your mind?
You know, listen, we live in very interesting times and perilous times, to be honest with you. And the voters spoke. And although I wasn't a Trump voter, that's who the electorate voted for, and I hope that there's good, because we're facing good things that happen. I'm really hopeful. I'm cautious about it, just like many Americans, but I'm very hopeful because, John, we really do face multiple crises. The $36 trillion in debt, for example, it's like a debt bomb that's going to happen, and I'm fearful that we're not paying attention to those type of issues, you know. Affordability issue, the wealth gap in this country. If you look in history at all empires that have fallen, the wealth gap and income disparity between the haves and the have-nots is a leading indicator, and we're in dangerous times.
Well, one crisis we're facing, and it's certainly not new, but it seems acute at this moment, is a crisis of public confidence in government and in elected officials. And you had mentioned in a prior conversation that you were concerned about the issuance of this presidential meme coin. Now, for our viewers that don't know, you've been part of some prominent Bitcoin-related cases. You're a Bitcoin advocate. Right. But this bothered you. Why?
Well, listen, you know, because unfortunately in this country, John, we tend to go from one extreme to the other. For the last 4 years, there's been a unlawful and unjust, basically, war against crypto industry. In fact, my former opponent, Elizabeth Warren, she announced her re-election that she was going to build an anti-crypto army. And that's unfair. It's not what America's about. So I've been fighting for smart, tailored legislation. But now, unfortunately, we may go from an extreme where an industry is being choked out unfairly to this wide open, no holds barred, free for all. And I don't want that.
Well, what's the problem with a sitting president having a meme coin?
Well, there's lots of things, right? For example, 80% are locked up to insiders. And so with these meme coins, that's not the technology that I supported and that I have fought for. Usually people get rugged. It's called a rug pull. And a lot of people lose money. And that's unfortunate. The other thing is that it opens the door to conflicts of interest, whether or not foreign nationals can, you know, sort of funnel money. And we just don't need that.
It's hard to trace who's buying them. Yeah.
It can be. I mean, it is an open public ledger.
Right.
And so, but it just opens conflicts. I don't think it's necessary. Why go there? But we'll see. You know, I gave the president unsolicited advice. I said, how about we come out and we donate all profits after expenses to hurricane and wildfire victims?
Great idea.
So I'm hoping they take my advice.
Fingers crossed. And Jon, you ran some 130,000 votes ahead of Donald Trump statewide, even as he improved his showing in the state over the last two elections. He carried.
Second most in the country.
He carried Fall River, first time a Republican has done that in many decades. What does that tell you about the mood of voters here?
Well, listen, I spent 8 months campaigning across the Commonwealth, and I spoke to tens of thousands of voters. And I can tell you that there's this feeling that they went too far left, you know, in the country and also in the Commonwealth, and offended center-left folks. You know, I describe myself as a center-right person, someone who is socially, you know, the Boston Globe called me downright liberal on social issues like a woman's choice.
Oh, the horror.
But certainly fiscally conservative. But when you go so far left, and what's happening, John, is we react, right? President Biden's administration reacted to the Donald Trump administration, and I think went too far. And unfortunately, we may see President Trump react to the Biden administration and go too far. And so, but here in Massachusetts, I think there's just a feeling that, hey, let's go back to some common sense, you know. And I think that that's desperately lacking in this state.
Now, if, just hypothetically here, if a hypothetical Republican, I assume someone's going to step forward to challenge Maura Healey next year, if and when she seeks re-election. What do you see potentially as the major or among the major issues there? Tax policy, education? What strikes you as top of mind right now for people?
Well, listen, we have an influx of immigration issues where the Commonwealth has spent $2.5 billion approximately in the last 3 years. At the same time, we're seeing an exodus in Massachusetts of people in their, you know, basically the prime of their working life. And they're leaving because Massachusetts is now the second most expensive state to live in. We have a housing crisis, immigration crisis, opioid problem. And I think that, you know, if you look at the governor's, you know, State of the Commonwealth address, she painted a much rosier picture. I actually was watching it and thought to myself, am I in the same state that she's living in? Because that's not what I'm seeing. And we have a real affordability problem here.
Well, she does talk often about the housing crisis. What is she proposing that you think is right or wrong?
Well, here's the problem is that, like a lot of politicians, including Republicans at times, John, they conflate income inequality with tax policy. So, for example, it sounds like this wealth tax is going to solve every issue that we have. It's going to solve the housing crisis. It's going to solve the immigration crisis. It's going to solve everything. And it's not, because tax policy does not equate to income inequality and wealth gap issues. Because unless you have a government that spends the money very well, then it's not going to translate into working people's pockets. And so, you know, why do we have the bridges on the Cape Cod in such disrepair? Why can't people afford houses here? And so I think that that's the problem, is that the governor is focused on identity politics, class warfare, and I think people are tired of that. And I think it's one of the reasons Donald Trump won.
Well, I guess by being here this morning, you were indicating you intend to continue to be part of the political discussion. Could that involve another run for office down the road? What's your current thinking on that?
Here's the thing I'm committed to, John. I'm committed to doing something about the one-party rule here. I mean, we have a legislature 88% Democrat. We have a governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, treasurer. Every office, attorney general, every office is Democrat. And I feel the same way if it was all Republicans. And you see that when you have one-party rule, it's not healthy. And look at the legislature fighting an audit of one of their own who wants to audit the legislature. And so I want to do something about that, because it's not healthy, whether that's running for office again or me behind the scenes helping. I haven't figured it out. But the Commonwealth hasn't heard the last of John Deaton, that's for sure.
We'll look forward to seeing you here again soon, Jon. Thank you.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.